going on, everyone? This is Zach from Z League. I wanted to start this video off by mentioning that this is basically a one-to-one re-upload of last year's Midwest Melee Primer. I made a couple of minor changes to a couple of slides, this opening one, and there's one slide a little into the video that talks about rules changes. I added a section about the rules changes that have happened since last year's Midwest Melee. Outside of that, all the slides are going to be the same. The majority of the information in that video is still going to be perfectly relevant today, so we didn't decide that we needed to redo the whole video from scratch. There are some slides that contain NZ cards in them with slightly outdated text. We did some small erratas last year. So for those people that are interested in coming to the event, make sure that you check the video description below for a link to our current NZ card library. That has all the current erratas in text on them. So if there's a card that seems appealing in the slides, just double check to make sure it didn't have any tweaks to its rulings. And then additionally, if you have any questions about the event or playing, or even if you don't plan on coming to the event but you want to learn more about playing the Score DBZ card game in 2025, check out the Discord link in the video description below. Our community will be more than happy to help you out. Without further ado, take it away past Zach and Derek with the primer.
What's up, everybody? This is Derek with the Z League, joined by...
Hey, it's Zach.
We are here to talk about our upcoming tournament, the Midwest Melee. Getting you all back up to speed. I know that, the people in the league will be a lot more familiar with some of this, but some of you I know are not parts of the league or haven't played a ton recently in the last 10, 20 years, whatever. And we just want to make sure that everyone's kind of on the same page, so that everyone's primed and ready to kind of get back in the driver's seat. So, without further ado, there's a lot to cover. What is Midwest Melee? Some of you might be hearing of this for the first time. It is going to be a in-person Score Z CCG tournament. The league hosts typically webcam-based stuff, but we thought it was a good opportunity to take a chance and do one of these in person. After the success of the Score Warriors Gather one, shout out to those guys in Atlanta earlier this year, it just kind of felt like the right time to kind of keep the energy high and do another one. Zach, what do I need if I want to come to this?
So mostly you're going to need to make sure you have a deck, but if you do not have cards, or you sold your cards, or you don't have a full collection, as the slide mentions, the tournament is going to be proxy friendly. So you can play literally your whole deck proxies. If you're not familiar with the concept of proxying, basically it's just when you have printouts of the card images, and typically what you would do is you would get random commons or whatever from the game you're playing, or even if you don't own any Dragon Ball Z cards at all, you could even get cards from a completely different card game like Pokemon or Magic or whatever other Dragon Ball Super, as long as they all have the same card back. You stick those random cards in some sleeves, and then you get your paper printouts of the cards and stick them inside the sleeve in front, and then you can basically just use that as if it was the real thing. We want to play against you, not your wallet, so we are 100% allowing proxies. The only request we really have is to make sure that they are a legible scan of the card. We have some promos that are alternate art, but we tried to typically reduce alternate art just for board clarity's sake.
And no tournament is complete without something to fight for. So there will be a number of prizes. We've already shown off a couple of them. One of the two kind of big ones that we've got so far are a full foil set of Cell Saga Masteries, as well as a playset of Confrontation. As of right now, those are kind of our two big prizes. We are adding more to the pool, as time and everything allows. One of the things we're kind of considering is sort of a prize table situation, where after the tournament's over, you'll kind of go in placing order. First place will pick which of the prizes they want. That way you end up winning the thing you actually wanted the most. Definitely something to kind of keep, to make it worth, playing for. There's no entry fee or anything like that. So even if you, lose every match or whatever, you're not out anything. But there is something to, some greatness to strive for.
As the slide mentions, we also are going to have sort of a deck building station. So if you show up before the event proper starts, I think the doors open at noon and the event starts at 2. So if you show up ahead of time and you need some help getting some cards together, we're going to have some proxies and cheaper cards that'll be available to use for deck building.
You're like 20,000 bulk cards on the table that anyone can dig through and build.
And yeah, additionally, if you need any assistance with creating your deck ahead of time, we'll have a link in the description below to our Discord server where we have an entire channel dedicated to deck building suggestions and advice, and everyone on the server will be more than happy to help you get a deck that is functional before the event starts.
And as that kind of fifth bullet point there mentions, it's just a great spot to kind of jump back into the game. It's just a great opportunity to get to play with some people who are super familiar with how the game works, can get your chops back up to speed. It's really low stakes. Even if you've never played before and you're just kind of interested, there will be plenty of ways to get involved. Even if the kind of tournament structure is daunting, don't let it be. There's plenty of opportunity even beforehand to get up to speed.
So yeah, this next slide, we're basically doing a primer on getting prepared for the event to catch everyone up to speed. So this slide has to do with what may have changed since the last time you played, some changes to the rules, some erratas, some ban and restriction changes. These are the major ones that we wanted to touch on. One important thing is when you go to build your deck, make sure you definitely check the CRD. We're going to have a link to our current CRD, which again is slightly different than ones you may have used in the past, but not too different, and it'll be linked in the video description below, or you can find it on our Discord server as well. But these are the major ones that I think we want to touch on.
And first off, and most important, this is a change that was implemented kind of years later, but your Sensei deck now can include any card. This is a big change for people who have only played right up to the end of the game, but any card can go in your Sensei deck. Cards that say Sensei deck only on them still have to start in your Sensei deck like they always did. But now you don't have to have Sensei deck printed on the card for it to be included in one. Every card in the game can go in there.
The only other thing to mention with that is that you can still only have the maximum number of copies of a card between your Sensei deck and your main deck. So you couldn't have 3 Trunks Energy Spheres in your main deck and 3 Trunks Energy Spheres in your Sensei deck. You could only have 3 total between the two of them.
This is really just biggest with it turns your Sensei deck into a little bit more of a versatile sideboard. It gives you more options for covering your butt in bad matchups.
The next would be the league only cards. So there are some cards from the character seasons that were released, like the Goku season, Vegeta season cards. Many of them will say league only on them. Those cards used to not be playable. Those cards are now all completely legal to be used. The only exception is if a card says league and tough enough only, or just tough enough only on it, or is printed in the tough enough set. Because this event will not be tough enough, those cards will not be legal. But if it just says league only on it, those cards are all perfectly fine to use. Supreme Weskai is a big one. This card, I believe, was banned during the Retro era, so if you didn't play during Retro, you wouldn't know this, but Supreme Weskai is banned.
One change we finally pulled the trigger on, Krill's Concentration and Piccolo and Heroes Gather are now restricted, which just means limit 1 per deck.
Yep, and that goes hand in hand with Hercule's Amazing Techniques. So this card, because of the Sensei deck changes, you're allowed to play any card in your Sensei deck. So Hercule's Amazing Techniques, before it was semi-restricted to 2 copies per deck, would previously allow you to do things like play a limit 1 per deck attack in your Sensei deck. That was normally you wouldn't be able to do that under the old rules because you couldn't put any card in your Sensei deck, but now you could put, say, something like Energy Lob in your Sensei deck, and then with Hercule's Amazing Techniques, you could play 3 or potentially 4 copies of that, and then in combination with Krill's Concentration and Piccolo and Heroes Gather, it would basically give you extreme access to some cards that are supposed to be limit 1 per deck. So these 2 hits are sort of a 1-2 punch to try to curb that interaction. The next one is, you can see Majin Buu Evil Blue has an errata. This was also, I believe, during the Retro era. Majin Buu Evil Blue no longer gains 5 power stages on its level 1 power. And Roshi, this is a change, I think, during the Score era, but it's worth mentioning because it's such a popular personality, which is he only looks at the top 6 cards when entering combat instead of the top 10.
And then one other one that's changed as a part of the league's changes, Piccolo's Multiform has always been a really, really strong card. It still is, but it has received a little bit of an errata. It's now treated as though it kind of reads as the following card. It says, Piccolo only. If you declare it to Kuwasa, then any physical attacks Piccolo performs that cannot stay on the table to be used again this combat. Again, this card stays on the table to be used 1 more time this combat. That's all the same as it always was. But those cards now also get removed from game after use. And then this card moves from game after use as well. So it just keeps you from being able to kind of loop some of those cards out of your discard pile multiple times. And pulls the power level of this card back in line a little bit.
We made some additional rule changes since last year's Midwest Melee. Starting in 2025, we've adopted a new going first rule known as the D bracket rule. This is a retro change, and it states that at the beginning of each game, all main personalities will always start at 5 above 0 no matter what. Additionally, you'll normally randomly determine who goes first. The exception to this part is that if one main personality starts at 5 above 0 and D bracket or higher, and their opponent starts in C or lower at 5 above 0, in that instance, the player who started in C or lower just goes first. This rule notably replaces the double power rule and the hero villain rules, meaning that you no longer care about which player is a hero or villain for going first, nor will any player start at anything other than 5 above 0 at the beginning of the game. Additionally, there are 3 changes to the banned and restricted list that we made for balance concerns. The first of which is that Long Journey is now banned. It was previously limit 1 per deck. Caught Off Guard Drill, previously limit 2 per deck, is now changed to limit 1 per deck. And Black Weakness Drill, which was unlimited originally, is now limit 1 per deck.
So, what's still good? We kind of called the slide. What's the elephant in the room? As anyone familiar with the Score game knows, at the end there, certain things were really strong. Spring West Power, which we talked about, was dealt with, but Master Roshi decks in various varieties were really, really good. Broly the Electrified, Broly decks, period. But Broly the Electrified specifically being kind of the linchpin that makes them as good as they are. And then Orange Style Mastery decks, specifically Orange Majin Buu Saga Mastery decks. All 4 of these decks, or versions of any of these decks, at the end of the game were very, very strong. Were dominantly strong. And all of these are still very, very playable. All of these stayed very good. If any of these are things you're familiar with, having played or played against, they will sort of feel similar. Not much has changed overall in the way these decks would feel or play.
Yep, and I would go on to argue that many of these decks are still at the top of the metagame. So yeah, Roshi Speedball being like the very fast Dragon Ball Victory deck, the Brawly usually Cell Saga Saiyan deck that just gets massive card advantage and uses the level 2 to find all of its tech cards that can defeat the opponent. Buu gets commonly played in Black Trunk Saga and Red Cell Saga, although I've also seen it see play in Red Trunk Saga and then some of our new Blue Masteries, which we'll get to in a moment. And then Orange Drill is probably one of the most infamous decks, the famous OVA or Orange Vegeta's Assault deck, where you build up like a very sort of prison-style board of drills that protect you from dying, protect the other drills from getting discarded, and then you win with one big combo finish using Orange Vegeta's Assault and Orange Joint Restraint Drill during combat to kill them all in one big long chain. Definitely you want to be prepared for these decks when you're going into the event, because these are some of the, even with our some of our changes, these are still top dogs, I would say.
Yeah, there's plenty more to talk about, which we'll cover some more of this in a minute, but all of these are things that you should still know exist and should be still very prepared to face. But something has changed, at least with this league here, and it's something called NewZ. It's abbreviated as NZ, and it's community-driven fan content sets, sort of similar to Panini's Fanzy community. We have a design team, playtesters, etc., who kind of do the same sort of thing. We play this game literally every day. We'd still run tournaments. We just do casual games, stuff like that. So in an effort to keep the game as fresh as we can, instead of just playing the same solved game for years and years and years, we have pushed some new cards into the meta to help mix that up a little bit. As it says in this second bullet here, it has introduced 201 new cards to the game. Not all of them, of course, are making waves or anything, but there are a bunch that are worth knowing exist. These sets come out a couple times a year. We do them on the 21st of June, 25th of December. But the point isn't to make cards that will just make like existing strong things better. Of course, there are some cards that are like just good or whatever that kind of go into stuff. But the point is to make cards that specifically elevate weaker decks to kind of be on a similar power level to the really strong ones, or things that are like tech answers to those decks. So as we were mentioning with that last slide, all 4 of those decks or more of those decks continue to be good, but there have been things that have been introduced to try to answer that a little bit, to try to rein some of that back a little. We cover missed movies, parts of the show, different characters and things like that that never got keys.
Yeah, one last thing I would mention with NZ is we also would find characters that kind of had underwhelming early set personalities and give them either new personality levels or individual cards that are specifically designed to buff them. And that's a large part of kind of the design goal with NZ is to try to get characters that are maybe cool but had kind of random old, early few set personalities that were kind of lackluster and bring them up to be more playable for sure. Yeah, so we have in conjunction with making new cards, we have two new mechanics that are brand new to the NZ card pool, and these are ones that you're definitely going to want to know about before playing. So the first one here is Transform. I think Transform is probably the most influential mechanic of the two, mostly because it's been around longer and it's very, very fun and also very powerful. So Transform is a keyword that is on almost any card type for the most part. Cards with Transform can be played directly from your discard pile as though they were in your hand by putting a matching card of the same style and type. So, for example, if you have a blue physical combat card in your discard pile and it has Transform, you can play it out of your discard pile by discarding a blue physical combat card. And it's not technically considered a discard. You place it from your hand, and that can come up for some other card effects. But for all, you can think of it mentally as a discard for all other purposes. Transform does not change when you can play a card. So, for example, if you had a card that could stop a physical attack that had Transform, you could only play it when that would make any sense, right? So you can discard if your opponent throws a physical attack, then during your defender's defense phase is when you would discard the blue physical combat card, for example, to use the block out of your discard pile.
Or like non-combat.
Yes. Yeah, so if it's a non-combat, you'd have to discard a matching style non-combat during your non-combat step when you could normally play that card. So it doesn't change the timing restrictions on any of the cards. It simply just allows you to play them from your discard pile. Now, notably for balance reasons, any card with Transform will either have manually written on the card or as just part of the Transform mechanic, means that if the card would go after it's been played, either from your hand normally or from the discard pile with Transform, in either case, the card will automatically be removed from the game after use. This also extends to non-combats with Transform if they would be discarded from play by a card effect, such as like a drill, for example, with Transform. They would automatically be removed from the game. This is to prevent you from just replaying the same copy of the same Transform card over and over and over and over and over again. So don't worry about that. There's still basically one-time use. It just allows you to use certain powerful or situational effects more, have more control over when you get to use them because you can play them if you've taken them as damage generally.
And then, of course, that means that being cognizant of both your discard pile and your opponent's kind of at all times is really important. Discard pile hate is at a premium more than it kind of ever was, just because anything that sits in a discard pile with Transform is an increasing toolbox. So just being on top of that is something to be aware of. Now, one thing that I would like to cover with Transform, we have kind of an etiquette. Most of us with Transform, when a card has it and is in the discard pile, we'll sort of turn it 90 degrees so that it's sticking out one direction or the other, so that you can kind of see that there are a couple of cards in the discard pile with Transform. That just makes it easier to, at a glance, look over and see if there is or is not something you need to be worried about. As Zach mentioned earlier, there are a couple of blocks, for example, and knowing that your opponent has a card in their discard pile that could be a block that maybe you've gotten to see their hand and now they don't have one now, but they could make one using their discard pile. Seeing that exists without having to just dig through their discard pile over and over again is just a friendly way to play the game. It makes things run smoother and keeps players more engaged. The next mechanic then is Resist. Before I get into this one, I kind of want to just preface why this is around. The power of the Orange Majin Buu Saga mastery can't be understated. Just set up kind of very uninteractable board states without a ton of answers. And one of the things that NZ has done, there have been a number of cards printed to combat that a little bit. So what it means is there is more non-combat drill-related hate than there was before. But what it also means is that decks that want to play 2 non-combats or something, just as supplementary things kind of catch some strays from that. So resist was a keyword that was introduced to kind of combat that a little bit and um, make things that you want to stick around for a purpose a little bit more sticky. So the way resist works is when a card with resist enters play, or when a card gains resist, if some kind of card effect grants it, place a resist counter on that card if it does not already have one. When a card with a resist counter would leave play by an opponent's card effect, whether it's shuffled, discarded, removed from game, whatever, just leaves the play area, you remove the resist counter instead. Essentially, they have to remove the card twice. Resist doesn't stack. A card has resist or it doesn't, so you can't give something resist that already has it. You can't have like 2 tokens on it. You just get 1 counter. If it has it, it can't get it again. If it loses it, it could get it again to get 1 back, but you can't ever have more than 1. And allies, if for some reason an ally were to end up with a resist counter on it, it does not need to be in control of combat to use its resist counter. It's not like activating its power or something like that. So it doesn't have to be in control of combat to be able to remove those to protect it.
And then I guess the only other thing to mention with resist is for things like drills with resist, if you advance a personality level, resist does not protect it, even if your opponent's card makes you advance the level. It has to be directly removed by an opponent's card effect to be saved by the counter. Same idea if you have a card that would discard your own card, such as Carpet Attack Technique. If you had a card with resist, it would not be protected from your own card that discarded it for a beneficial effect because it's got to be your opponent's card effect, not yours.
Yeah, I think that kind of covers both the mechanics. This slide here is just sort of an example of 2 of the cards that have this type of effect. So Blue Colossal Throw here is one of the more impactful new cards and has helped Blue a lot. Blue has historically always kind of struggled with hand advantage, action economy, things like that. So we wanted to kind of give them a little bit more oomph in keeping up with some of the decks that have more access to that. So this card has Transform. It's a physical combat card. It's a physical attack doing +3 power stages of damage. It lowers your opponent's anger level, and then if successful, you can search your discard pile for a blue style card that isn't this one and put it into your hand. Then you're removed from the game after use. Grabbing any card is really strong. Anyone that knows Red Axe Heel Kick knows that that card is great. However, red is also much better than blue. So this card, while it doesn't just get an attack like that one does, it's a little bit more versatile. It still has to be successful. Because it has Transform, it's also way more telegraphed. You don't have to like wonder if this is going to come out of your opponent's hand. It's in their discard pile and you can see it, so you can kind of know to hold a block. Obviously, this card's still great, and Transform gives you a lot more agency on when you can use this kind of effect. It just gives you a lot more opportunity to kind of keep yourself in the game with a typical blue hand, which is going to be smaller and generally less effective than a lot of other hands.
Red Channeling Drill is our resist example. So this is a drill that once per combat, if you have 2 or more anger, you can lower your anger back down to 0 to stop physical or energy. Resist was sort of added onto this card and other cards like it because these are cards that need to sit and play for a few turns to get value out of them. But because the environment had become very, very anti-non-combat, anti-ally because of all of the especially because of all the orange decks, you just sort of need a lot of cards to fight those decks. Cool drills like this that would be fun to use, but need to stay around to really get any sort of value to be worth playing would sort of just get cacked immediately after playing them. Resist lets them stick around long enough for you to sort of feel like you got your value out of them without making them just completely unkillable. So this is a good example of that.
So going a little further into one final new mechanic, we've introduced something called levels. These levels can only be reached via a specific additional card. If your stack includes one of these locked levels, it's considered to be part of your stack for MPPV. It's considered like you have 5 levels, but it isn't considered it isn't considered in play for any other card effects, game mechanics. If a card were to like level you up to your highest level, like let's say
Goku's Farewell, for example.
Goku's Farewell or Apocalyptic Battle or something like that, this level 5 isn't visible to card effects like that. And the levels below these are considered to be the level below this is considered to be your highest level. So if you had this Goku, your level 4 is your highest level for any card effect or game mechanic otherwise. And despite being able to hop to this, you can't play like a 1 through 3 and then like still be able to hop to 5. You still have to have a 4 in your deck. the way this Goku works, first thing you would need the God Key Ritual. It's a non-combat. You play it, you activate it during combat. You can't win by MPUPV. Discard the top 5 cards of your life deck. You may then advance your personality to any level with Super Saiyan God in the title. Your opponent skips their next attack or attacks phase, and then away from game to use. So you level up and then go use your personality right away. There's a Goku and there's a Vegeta. Goku is a little bit more meta impactful, so it's the one that we wanted to kind of showcase here. He does have a parenthetical effect, which just says you can't get to this level without God Key Ritual. And then if your power rating is 0 at the end of combat, you lower your MP to level 1. You can't redirect damage to allies, so you can't just use allies to stay above 0 forever. But all of the kind of God levels, both of them have this effect where if they get to 0, they get D-level. He then has a power, focused energy attack, or prevents all of the damage from a physical or energy attack, and then draws a card. Obviously, really strong power. It does take some work to get set up. You got to play it on combat. It's got to stick around long enough to use. You got to burn 5 cards out of your life deck. And if you get hit to 0, you lose this level and you got to do it all over again. Definitely something to be cognizant of if you were to run into one of these levels or be interested in building with them yourself. And we just felt it was really important to know how these work.
For another example of a locked level, we have the Piccolo Fused. Basically, Piccolo Fused is supposed to represent the Piccolo and Kami fusion. So you, similar to the Super Saiyan God versions of Vegeta and Goku, you can only advance to this level via Forbidden Fusion, which is the card on the right. This card also counts as Kami Fused and can be in your MP stack if you are Kami. So basically, you can use this as Kami level 5 or a Piccolo level 5. Kami is a new NZ card, so feel free to check out what he can do in the link in the description. So Forbidden Fusion, Piccolo and Kami only. Similar to God Key Ritual, you cannot win by most powerful personality victory because we're skipping right to 5. You can remove an Namekian Heritage ally control and the bottom 5 cards of your discard pile from the game. If you do, advance to Piccolo Fused. Piccolo Fused is a little different than Godku and Gogeta in that it counts as a fused personality, so cards that care about being fused care about this personality, and you cannot be de-leveled because you are fused. So, for example, if your opponent has self-threatening position, that will not lower you off of this level. They'd have to play a dedicated card that would defuse you, like, I think it's like Majin Buu's stomach or something like that, the location or battleground, as one example. And then his constant combat power, your opponent plays with their hand revealed. The first time you take damage each combat, raise your MP to its highest power stage, or shuffle the top 4 cards of your discard pile into your life deck. And very similar to Godku, he starts at a pretty high bracket, and then he sort of rapidly falls down the bracket as he goes down, kind of balance out the fact that you can skip right to him.
And there are only 3: the Super Saiyan God Goku, Super Saiyan God Vegeta, and Piccolo Fused. So it's not a huge thing. You've got to learn like 40 of these. It's just those 3. So, kind of mentioned, the NZ cards are supposed to just kind of freshen the game up, and therefore you're going to kind of course, see some of them played against you. A deck doesn't have to have them. Don't take any of these going to next slides as like, you need to run this, because we have people who don't play them at all in the league, and even people who have won running 0 of these cards. So they're not like power crept out of existence. Like, they're not crazy prepped or anything to where like you're required to have these in your deck. However, that of course doesn't mean that you shouldn't be prepared to face some of these. Some of them are quite good, and some of them are, if not necessarily good, more interesting than some of the things that you would have used to be able to do. So people just like to play them because they're kind of more fun. Just being aware of them is good advice. It's, as there's 200 of these, it's definitely going to be worth checking the link in the description to go read through those on your own pace. But there are a number of cards that we think are like, of the ones that like exist, these are the ones that we think will definitely show up. So we're going to go over a few of these in the next few slides of things that we just think you should know exist. There are plenty of other ones that are good, and I think you should go read all of them just so you don't get blindsided by anything. But if you weren't going to go read, weren't going to go do any kind of extra homework, these are the ones that you should take some notes on.
So Blue got an enormous buff from NZ. One thing at the very end of Score Z is that outside of the Roshi Speedball deck, which is blue in name only, it plays maybe like 3 blue cards. Blue was a very underwhelming style, mostly because its individual card quality was pretty low. Some of its masteries were actually pretty strong, like Cell Saga Mastery strong, Majin Buu Saga Mastery strong, etc. But the individual card quality was pretty low, so blue was a big focus for us for NZ. I would definitely say Blue Colossal Throw is probably the biggest sort of poster boy for blue being much better. We talked a lot about this card in the transform section. A couple other things worth mentioning with this card, because it is a card with throw in the title, there's a couple cards that can actually go find this card even more easily than just it being discarded by damage. So for example, Majin Buu's Chokehold, if successful, is a physical attack that can go find a card with throw in the title. Because blue has a few other playable cards with throw, this was a really specific design decision to make this card also have throw in the title. So you can have a little package with this, things like blue round throw, for example, a couple other NZ cards to sort of give blue a sort of centralized plan around that package. Blue Enlightened Mastery is a really fun mastery. One thing we tried to do with a lot of the NZ cards is sort of make existing score cards that were not very good or maybe just a little bit under the power curve and find ways to sort of enable them without having to print a lot of new cards. Blue Enlightened Mastery takes the fact that 80% of blue cards during the game randomly had anger lowering effects stapled onto them, but oftentimes anger lowering effects don't do anything unless your opponent happens to be a very anger focused deck. They're sort of not as valuable of a thing that your card can do, unlike gaining an anger, which is a little bit more proactive. So we made the entire Blue Enlightened Mastery around that idea. So it allows you to basically use cards that would lower your opponent's anger to raise your anger instead. Also, if your opponent does have 0 anger, you could also, instead of lowering them in anger, power up to full and draw a card. Blue notoriously had very, very bad card economy as far as having extra cards to draw, unlike styles like Saiyan and Namekian, which draw lots of cards, even red with things like Red Axe Heel Kick, and then black can discard cards out of your opponent's hand, so orange gets drills, which sort of act like extra cards that they can use. So blue is really the one style that didn't have a lot of that. This mastery really is very useful on that front, so it gives blue a way to use more levels, which is another thing we had a big goal for, and then also lots of cards to go back through. Finding old cards that had anger lowering and anger raising effects on the same card means that there's all of a sudden some blue cards that can raise your anger 3 with one shot. So really powerful. And then blue 1-inch punch is another card that allows physical beatdown to be a lot stronger because it'll allow you to play personalities that are a little weaker and still get a lot of extra damage out of them. And it goes hand in hand with the fact that so many blue cards lower your opponent's anger, so it allows you to translate that into something actually useful and more proactive. If your opponent doesn't happen to care about anger, this card will punish them for the fact that they're not playing any anger and the fact that you're lowering their anger so much.
Past that, black has some serious new stuff too that is worth discussing. So, as always, black is still discard focused, still non-hate focused. So there's some of that that's worth discussing and knowing exists. Black Future's Goblin and Aura Eruption, I think, are two of kind of the most powerful transform cards. These two plus Blue Colossal Pharaoh are kind of like the trifecta of transform cards, I think. But Galagun has an energy for 5. You can discard the top 4 cards of your deck to discard 2 non-combats or allies. It just gives you a little bit more opportunity to clear the table. And the fact that you can do it from the discard pile now means you don't even have to keep it in hand. Black Aura Eruption is kind of another one of those, but it stops a physical or energy attack. As historically, black has a lot of only blocks. This stays in that trend. Then, if you declare to Tokawaza, remove the bottom 5 cards of your opponent's discard pile from the game, and your main personality gains 5 power stages. Removed from the game after use. So, just deals with discard pile a little bit, which is good. Discard pile hate is at a premium now with Transform existing. Gives you some stages on a block, which is also good. And it also encourages black energy a little bit more, which is always like pretty good. But this sort of helps keep that more in the game. It gives you more stages after using it, so you just get to block an attack and then get an attack off afterward. The Black Calamity Mastery. What this one does is it takes your black style cards that can stop attacks, and they now raise your anger. Black has always had a couple of anger cards, but traditionally struggled a little bit with like natively leveling. This gives you a little bit more oomph in decks that want to do that. And then also you can, whenever you play or use a card effect that discards cards from your opponent's hand or removes cards in their discard pile from the game, you can make them discard the top 3 cards of their deck. So it turns your hand destruction or discard pile hate into mill. There's some times where a discard isn't great, and now you can turn it into something even better. There's times where a discard pile doesn't really exist, so there's nothing really to remove from it. This just turns that into an opportunity. Black Aura Eruption, of course, goes great with this because it hits their discard pile. You could choose to make it mill 3 and then also gain you stages instead of discarding the bottom 5. There's just a lot of things that Black Calamity can enable. And if you are not familiar with it, it is something to definitely note.
One thing worth mentioning with Black Calamity as well, if you have cards like Black Body Destruction that can either be an attack or a block, even if you use them as an attack, so like Black Body Destruction, for example, is a physical attack or stops a physical attack, that card, even if you throw it as an attack, counts for Black Calamity because it is you're playing a card that can stop an attack, even though it's not currently stopping an attack. And that'll allow you to raise your anger. So cards that are like have that type of ability to be either an attack or a block are beneficial in Calamity because they let you gain anger more proactively.
Black Pointed Kick is one that some decks won't care about as much, but just what it can do is worth knowing it's around. It's physical that does life cards, and if successful, any cards that were dealt as damage that were non-combats, you can play any of those as though they were your own cards. They're considered to be black cards now. This is a thing that, like, if you're going to be playing non-combats, or if you're building a deck kind of teching to be ready for some, just knowing that this card is around and something that can be played against you is worth keeping track of.
One thing worth mentioning in Black, if you poke around the Black NZ cards, you may notice a little kick-related sub-theme. That's just one thing to explore if you are building a deck in Black. So next up, some Namekian cards, probably headlined here by Namekian Crash. So Namekian Crash is sort of in the same vein that Blue Colossal Throw is sort of a similar card to Red Axe Heel Kick for Namekian. It's an Endurance 3, physical doing +3 power stages of damage. It has Empower 4, and then if you don't empower it, you can choose up to 2 cards in your discard pile, shuffle them back into your life deck. But if you've already shuffled cards back into your life deck earlier this combat, you can choose to place one of the 2 of those cards into your hand instead, and then it removes itself from the game after use. The other thing worth noting is this card has no restriction on what type of card you can grab. I've grabbed like City in Turmoil with this card and then played it the next combat, so this card can be exceptionally powerful and goes really well with like a Piccolo's Multiform style deck, for example. Next up would be the Namekian Dragon Mastery. So we decided that there were no masteries that were sort of Dragon Ball themed in the original game, so we decided to make this mastery. This mastery basically lets you swap balls in and out of play. So the first time you hit them with a Namekian attack, if you don't have any Dragon Balls in play, you can put one into play, but you don't use its power that turn. So you would basically, if it had like a static ability, that static ability would turn on after the combat was over. But the first ball you get with the mastery, if you don't have any in play, doesn't actually use its power right away. However, every subsequent time you hit them once per combat with a Namekian attack, you can basically swap a ball you have in play, shuffle it back into your deck, find a different ball from your deck, and play it and use its power once per combat. And that lets you do really powerful plays where you're swapping balls that like draw cards in and out of play. So don't sleep on this mastery. Lastly, we decided to add like a little package of Namekian Anger cards, headlined by Namekian Rage Drill here. It has Resist. An effect puts 1 or more cards back into your life deck, raise your anger level 1. The first Namekian style attack each combat does plus X life cards of damage, where X is your current anger level, and you get to keep this drill in play even when you advance personality level. There's a few other Namekian cards that have effects that let you raise your anger, because Namekian didn't have almost any in the base game, and we wanted to add some of those, so be on the lookout for those in the NZ section for Namekian.
And then we'll want to cover a little bit that red and orange have to offer. We'll start with red Critical Blow. It's the only red card that that felt necessary to include on this list. It is a physical attack for +4 stages, gives you an anger. Then if successful and you declare it Tokuwaza, you can discard the top card of your deck to draw a card and remove from game after use. It doesn't really need a lot of introduction. That's just good. Physical for a good amount of damage and anger, and maybe draw a card. Just a really powerful card you should know exists. Orange Body Morph does kind of a similar thing where it's just like something you should know can happen. It's got some endurance, which orange likes. Orange physical has kind of in spades too, so it just sort of fits in that mold. It's physical doing +3 stages of damage, so not a lot of damage, but for the remainder of combat, when you perform an orange style attack, it's considered to be an energy attack for opponent's card effects. So it basically just turns all of your physical attacks into cards that have to be blocked by energy blocks. Anyone super familiar with the game will know that like most decks play more physical blocks than they do energy blocks anyway, because physical beats is already stronger than energy, because sometimes you just can't use an energy attack because you got hit with a physical, where you at least can always use a physical attack. So turning all of your physicals into things that are just harder to block is something that a physical beats deck likes. Orange Physical Beats was a deck that was not quite to the power level it would like need to be really competitive. But it has received a couple of cards that like really kind of push it in that direction, and I think it's much more playable than it was. Body Morph is a huge part of why that is. And then the last one that we want to talk about here for this slide is Orange Ginyu Force Flash. This is one of the cards that we mentioned a few slides back where sometimes a stack kind of just does a thing that's not particularly cool on its own or whatever, but with the introduction of like one or two cards can kind of make a whole new archetype out of. This is one of those situations where one card turned that deck into something playable. So it's got Transform, which makes it always more accessible, but Focused Energy Attack doing X life cards of damage, where X equals 2 times the number of allies you have in play. If you force your main personality, this costs 0 to perform. If successful, search your deck or discard power for an ally, place it into play at 3 above 0. For game after use. So getting something that the Ginyu Force stack does is they are considered to have 4 allies in play because you've got the whole crew. So you've already got 4 guys there, which means this is just off rip and energy for 8. This couples really well with a Battleground location card called West City that gives you an additional 4. With just that location in play and the Ginyu Force stack, you can make this like an energy for 16, which is like crazy huge. Cost 0 is nuts. And if your opponent's playing Orange Ginyu Force, then you just sort of know, okay, the second I draw an energy block, I'm just going to grip this with my life for the rest of the game. That's just sort of that's what you need to do against this kind of card. But another one of those that if you didn't know this existed and your opponent was playing Orange Ginyu, you're like, oh, that's weird. And then they just windmill this down and hit you for energy for 16 that costs 0. That would be a frustrating thing.
So here is some freestyle cards. A lot of these are very techy and sort of answers to different things in the metagame, and then the last one is sort of a buff to an underplayed personality group. Freeze's Deception. So this card is a combat. It's unaffected by constant combat powers. This makes you discard 3 cards from your own life deck, but you advance your opponent's main personality 1 level. Notably, this is not anger, meaning cards like Winter Countryside that stop players from gaining multiple anger don't interact with this card. This card also is unaffected by constant combat powers. This is because of the notorious Gogeta Settle Down level 2, which prevents players from using combats. If your deck is exceptionally reliant on combat cards in a pinch, you can use this card maybe out of your Sensei deck to force them to level up. But probably the best use case for this card is against drill-related decks, such as Orange Majin Buu Saga, because advancing them a personality level will make them lose all their drills. And there can be some other use cases against personalities that don't have very good level 2s, but exceptionally good level 1s, such as Roshi or Yajirobe, for example. Last part is a little gimmick, which is that this card also counts as a copy of Freeze's Irritation Grows in your discard pile. There is a little bit of a package you can run with this. I think it's Freeze's Daunting Bombardment, if I recall correctly, and Freeze's Irritation Grows, which is a physical attack that gains you anger for every copy of Freeze's Irritation Grows in your discard pile. We have a new NZ Frieza stack that's worth looking at, that little package might go well in, that you can look at, but for the most part, you play this for that second part of the ability to advance them a level. Heroic Deeds is a card that we were inspired from a virtual card from Retro Group. It's a hero's only energy attack, and it can shuffle any card in play into its owner's life deck, with the exception of main personalities, Dragon Balls, Senseis, or Masteries, which are not affected by this. Notably, things this can hit, obvious things like drills, non-combats, and allies, but some other sneaky things such as cards that are attached. There are some cards that are attached, such as Red Thunderclap, where if they're not attached to a personality, there's no other way in the whole game to get rid of them, except for this card. This card can shuffle cards that are attached. If your opponent has a card that stays on the table, such as Red Shattering Leap or Saiyan Destiny, this card can shuffle away the second use or third use of that card. So there's a lot of really powerful tech uses for this card, and it's heroes only because it was sort of a counterbalance to Android 19's Energy Burst, which villains had access to, but heroes didn't. To really shore up freestyle decks, Hero Freestyle had a really hard time dealing with non-combats especially. Notably, this also gets around things like Orange Focusing Drill, because you can actually just target other things, because Orange Focusing Drill only stops them from being discarded or removed, but not from being shuffled back into the deck. So that's definitely one that if you're a hero, you at least want to consider in your Sensei deck. Lastly, we have the Van, which is one of my favorite cards we've made. The Van, also considered to be named the car for card effects. If you're familiar with some of the Android cards from Cell Saga, they, especially Android 17, have various effects that care about the car being in play. Unfortunately, the car is just not that good of a card. This card, as you can see, while attached to your Android 16, 17, or 18, when entering combat, you get to draw a card, and you can only have one of them in play at a time. So this is a much more beneficial card to have stick around and play for long periods of time. You're not going to feel as bad. Android 17 is especially notable with this card because 2 of his level 1 personalities go and find copies of the car, which this counts as. The other thing is this part of this parenthetical is this card's considered to be a location for card effects instead of a non-combat while attached. So this means that once you get this card attached, if your opponent has to play a card that specifically can discard or remove a location from play. So if your opponent just has a card that says discarded on combat, if you've already gotten this attached, that card can't hit this card. The other important thing that's a rules thing is that this effect doesn't make it so that this card is discarded when a different battleground or location comes into play. It's only for card effects, so just playing a new battleground or a new location does not affect this card. You have to have specifically one of the handful of cards that can discard a location or something like Heroic Deeds that could shuffle this card back into the life deck. But definitely, especially Android 17, but definitely 16 and 18 can take a huge benefit from this card and the card advantage that it supplies.
Speaking of locations, we've got 2 that were introduced in the game. There are a couple more that we've added, but these 2 especially are just worth noting. Dismal Future specifically is kind of the big one. Players cannot have more than 4 cards in their hand. Player would search their life deck. They search the top 6 cards instead. There's obvious things that this does, so I'll start with the least obvious thing first. When players search their life deck, they search the top 6 instead. Little buff that this does, cards that search like the top 3 or whatever, for example, like the high-tech Majin Vegeta level 1, could now search the top 6. So there are some cards that will now search more cards than they might have before, but generally, it's going to prevent things like Broly Electrified, Gohan level 2, Cell level 2, Fatherly Advice, things like that will just go search your deck for any given card. Sword decks, etc. It will then nerf those searches into top 6 searches instead of full deck, which makes it a lot less likely that they're going to hit the thing they want to. Also, you can't have more than 4 cards in their hand. This has obvious implications, but is, of course, created as an answer to the giant 8-card hand Broly decks that rampage around. This really limits what they can do while this card's in play. Additionally, Lonely Canyon is also created to cover some of the inherent weakness that comes with being an energy attack deck. Like we mentioned once before, there are some times where you draw a handful of energy attacks, and then your opponent hits you with, say, in Cross Punch for 10 stages, and you're at 0, and you just can't do anything for the entire rest of the combat. That just sometimes happens as an energy deck. Lonely Canyon exists to make it so that those decks can kind of stay in the game a little bit more. That happens, that can be just like a 1 combat death. You can just take 40 cards to the face, so you just pass 6 consecutive times. This helps you at least stay a little more involved while it's happening. You can still pull off attacks that cost 2. Obviously, of course, this is still to a minimum of 0. Doesn't get you a stage or anything weird like that. It still just makes, if card costs 1, it's now 0. Card costs 2, it's now 0. Card costs 4, it's now 2. Just keeps those decks a little bit more involved and a little less absolutely locked out of playing the game in that kind of situation.
Yeah, these are 2 sort of more metagame calls. Definitely Dismal is one to look out for because it affects a lot of cards and a lot of strategies, and it's sort of there as an anti-meta card. So this is one that if you have a very bad Brawly matchup, please look for this card and use it. So next up we have the Negation Cycle. So Trunks Energy Sphere is probably one of the most iconic Dragon Ball Z scorecards. These are a cycle of limit 1 per deck spheres that every style gets 1, that not only get to do the same thing as Trunks Energy Sphere, where they can negate the effects of a combat card, but they also have other pretty big effects, and all of them notably remove themselves from the game after use and are only get the benefit if you are declaring a Tokawaza. Otherwise, they are just like a removed from the game sphere, which is probably just worse than a regular Trunks Energy Sphere. They're all, you can kind of read them on screen. I'll kind of briefly touch on them. The black one basically makes your opponent shuffle their hand back in and draw 1 less card. Blue one can go find a non-combat card out of your discard pile and put it into play. The Namekian one shuffles 5 cards back into your deck and rearranges your top 6. The orange one searches for an orange-style drill and puts it into play directly and puts you back up to full. Red Negation can either gain you to anger or just straight up draw you a card. And lastly, Saiyan Negation can lower them 2 stages and make all your Saiyan style attacks do +2 stages for the remainder of combat. So these all sort of tie into with the themes of the style, and all are very playable. Most decks, I would say, play 2 Trunks Energy Sphere and 1 of these, but hey, if you really hate combat cards in your deck, in a pinch, you could play all 3 copies of Trunks Energy Sphere plus your 1 negation card to really hate on those.
Now, after getting past the individual cards for decks, we have introduced a couple of new stacks to the game. One of them is Broly from the DBS Broly movie. So this introduced a new Broly stack. However, it is Broly from that movie. So he is a different character. As you'll note on his card at the bottom too, he also says DBS Broly. He isn't specifically Broly. So you can't mix these in with other Brolys. You can't mix those into this stack. However, though, he is still Broly for Broly only cards that you would include in your deck. But as far as your stack goes, they can't be interchanged. Important to note, he, of course, is Broly. He gains anger like crazy. In doing so, his stages stay very high. He rushes to 4 very quickly, and then will loop his 4 over and over again. It's sort of that's what 4 wants to do. Each time you hit 5 anger, you get a draw card. So there are times where you can just kind of keep that going. So in a beatdown versus beatdown scenario, thematic as all hell, it's really hard to be a beatdown deck that beats this Broly deck. So you need your deck to either do something else, or you need to do something to answer this. Because he gains anger as quickly as he does, it means he refreshes his stages a lot, which means it's really easy for him to get around any kind of beatdown and stuff that you do, and just generally have more usable stages than the average beatdown deck. If you can lock him out at level 1, if you can really get the anger going early, level 1 is a lot less good than the rest of the stack. It's still an Omni block on level 1, which is really strong, not to be underrepresented there, but it's so much less good than what the rest of the stack is trying to do. So if you get him stuck on 1, 2, etc., and not rushed all the way up, you'll be in a lot better spot against Broly.
One last thing worth noting with the NZ Broly specifically is that he is, by our rules, considered a rogue personality. So you can actually play him as a hero, which is admittedly pretty rare. Often you'll still play him as a villain, but it is an option, but only specifically with these 4 personality levels. You can't, the original Broly can only be played as a villain. So other notable personalities, we have Gogeta. So we have a new fusion method using the 2 fusion dance into Gogeta personalities here. He is extremely powerful. He's sort of like a Piccolo multiform on a stick, and that stick is an eye, and it wants to kill you. So to get to Gogeta, you have to use one of either Goku Desperate Plea or Vegeta Humbled in conjunction with either the other one, or probably more beneficial would be to use an actual Goku or Vegeta ally or main personality. These 2 specific, the fusion ones, can only be played as an ally, but you could use a regular Vegeta or regular Goku as your main personality and one of these as an ally. And then if you are on the same level as the ally, so you have to be on level 1 with both of the personalities in question, you can activate the power of either Goku Desperate Plea or Vegeta Humbled, and you will fuse into Gogeta Fusion Reborn. So Gogeta sits in your Sensei deck, but he has a special parenthetical where he cannot be removed from the game, and is not considered in your Sensei deck for card effects. So, for example, cards like Red Aerial Force just don't affect Gogeta, but at the same time, he's not considered to take up a slot for your opponent's card effects. So, cards like Red Annihilation that put cards into your Sensei deck, or Red Aerial Force that care when you get to 0 cards in your Sensei deck. While he does count as a Sensei deck card for deck building purposes, once you're in game, it's basically like he's not in there. It's the easiest way to think of it. So he can't be taken out by your opponent, but he also doesn't take up slots for cards that care about that. And then he has a special fusion rule, so you have to fuse him with one of the aforementioned allies, and he basically can only stay in play for 1 turn. So if he leaves play for any reason, you return to your Sensei deck, your main personality returns 5 power stages above 0 if he was used in the fusion, and then you shuffle the ally or allies used for the fusion back into your life deck. So if you use this as an ally, then if he gets discarded or otherwise removed, the fusion card goes back in your Sensei deck, the allies go back into the deck. If it was your MP, then just the ally goes back, and you go back to the same level you were on at 5 above. And then, unlike other fusions, this fusion only lasts until the end of combat, in which case you follow the directions above and defuse. He is extremely powerful, but he is a little hard to get going sometimes because you have to find your specific ally. And if that ally gets removed, well, you're not going to be able to get access to him.
Speaking of things that are extremely powerful, something worth knowing exists is Jamemba. Jamemba is a card that we mostly brought over from the retro virtual sets. They had a 1 through 4. Jamemba, we have a 1 through 3, and they function just a little bit differently than than the retro levels did, but the concept of them is still very much the same. He has sort of a pocket dimension where when you use a card's printed endurance, or when you use a styled card with endurance, place it under your mastery after use. Once for combat, you can put a card from your hand under your mastery. Doesn't have to be one with endurance, and then pull a card out from under your mastery and play it. And that can perform an attack, of course. That card then gains a read from game after use, so you can't keep looping those. But it just means that he can tuck all kinds of different stuff under his mastery to be this kind of perfect hand that he can toolbox out of whenever he needs to. So it's really worth knowing that this exists. He's got a huge power level. Obviously, from the very end of the series, he's going to be big. Facing Super Saiyan 3 Goku and Gogeta, he's obviously got a huge level. That power level just kind of continues on to his level 2 and 3. His level 2 is also good, and then his 3 lets you pick either his level 1 or 2 power. So it all kind of stays relevant the whole time you're through the stack. But just knowing that throughout the course of the game, they're going to be piling things under their mastery that they can then pull out at a later time to use on you is really, really strong. This works super good in a black deck where they can tuck away good hand discarded cards to hit you when it matters more. It works really good in a red deck to get anger or axial kicks when there's a better attack of discard pile, things like that. There's all sorts of things you can do with this. Orange is of course a great place for it because there's a billion orange physicals with endurance, so you have plenty of options to get them under there on their own without taking extra steps. Just really worth knowing that this card exists.
One last little rules thing with this card, despite the nomenclature we used in the slide that we said hiding them, the cards are face up under the mastery, so both players have access to look at them. Right. So you'll be able to know what's coming, but it is important to know that you can't, the player who's playing Jamemba can't hide them literally face down from you, because some other cards in other games that are kind of in this vein are face down. I wanted to make sure I mentioned that it's face up for actual gameplay in this game. And then here is sort of a who's who of other cards. Cool isn't always good, but basically a lot of NZ design was basically trying to find existing things that the game had in it that were just barely not playable and making them good enough to be played, and that can come in a variety of ways. So we have a few different things here, such as new personality levels like Goten, who is sort of a Kamehameha tribal personality that lets you play all those Kamehameha cards that care about how many Kamehamehas you have. Bulma's Ingenuity Drill goes really well with Kid Buu Saga level 1 that cares about Bulma named cards leaving play, which there were a few that you could use, but only if Bulma was your ally from Saiyan Saga, and if you're trying to play Bulma as your main personality, those don't work. So the Ingenuity Drill allows you to use those, as well as give cards that stay on the table count as Bulma named cards, meaning that you get to do all sorts of mill shenanigans. Red Mighty Mass Secret is another way that we tried to implement the ability to fuse more easily. Fusion is a really cool mechanic, but if you've ever played the Score Z game, you know that fusion is dog shit, basically, because the cards that allow fusion to happen are too clunky, and they're really difficult to pull off. Red Mighty Mass Secret basically lets you use Mighty Mask and fuse directly into Gotenks, no matter which level of Gotenks you have. If you're on level 1, 2, 3 Mighty Mask, you get to fuse directly into the appropriate level Gotenks with this, and then it counts as the fusion dance. So you still use all the same fusion dance mechanics with the putting the cards underneath the Z sword, but this is just a easier way to actually use Gotenks, who's a super cool character, but is really, really difficult to use, especially the level 3 in the vanilla game. It's almost impossible to use that unless you have a really gimmicky deck that probably won't effectively work very well. A few other ones, Celestial Halo would be one of the other ones that's worth noting. The Celestial Fighters are pretty cool from World Game Saga, but a lot of them, because they didn't get a lot of other support, are sort of just barely on the outside looking in. A lot of them only have 1 through 3 personalities, so this card starts the game in play. It lets you get Grand Kai out of your deck to use right at the beginning of the game, which is a huge benefit. He gives you a damage buff, as does the Halo itself. And then the Halo gives you some minor protection against 1 through 3 Anger Cheese decks, which can come up, especially with some of the new NZ stuff that we have. There's a little bit more of that than maybe there was in the original game. And some of those personalities were hard to use because you risked getting cheesed out by brawly 1 through 3 Anger deck. And because they were a little underpowered to begin with, the Halo can really help them out. I've seen Alibu, I've seen Caterpie, I've seen Moraiko, Celestial Halo decks. They're all pretty effective. You want to talk about the last couple on here, Derek?
Yeah, of course. Saiyan Best Friends drill is one of a number of cards that we introduced within the Saiyan card pool that kind of do like Saiyan cares about allies as a deck concept isn't something that was like super prevalent in Saiyan before. And so leaning into that a little bit, but also Saiyan World Game Saga Mastery is a card that, well, exists. And that doesn't really mean much of anything to anyone in vanilla score. But it's a cool idea of a Saiyan deck that instead of like doing a bunch of extra damage wants to like prevent damage. And so we leaned into that a little bit too with a number of cards that helped Saiyan both play allies a little better, but also cared more about the damage prevention aspect. So this is just a drill that prevents damage from attacks. And then also when entering combat, you get to pick one of your allies and it can take over combat even if you're not at 0. It just helps you set some uh, fun stuff up. It also, of course, being Goku and Vegeta, you can imagine how this works great with Gogeta, being able to pick the Goku or Vegeta ally that lets you fuse, be able to have them take over combat even if you're not at 0, because you can kind of pop the fusion right away. That's very strong. And then Orange Rising Energy is sort of what we chose as kind of the poster boy of a cycle of cards. There are a lot of masteries in the game that are great. There are also a lot of masteries that just like aren't, and would just kind of never get played over some of the ones that existed. So there's a number of cards that we introduced, kind of 1 or 2 per color, that create that attach to bad masteries and do some kind of thing to make those work better. This one specifically, Orange Rising Energy, attaches to your Trunks and Saga Orange Style Mastery and kind of works the best of the ones that came out. This is an idea that also originated through Retro. They have Namekian Insult that they used that attached to one of the Namekian Masteries, as well as they had another card too. We kind of just extended that, gave one to each color, to each of the kind of particularly bad masteries. So just kind of keep an eye out for those as you're digging through. Just make sure you read through each one of these because they do amp up some of the underplayed masteries a little bit. Gine there also, she just has an effect that using one of your card effects has you discard a card from your hand. You can discard the top card of your deck instead to use it. Obviously, that pairs really well with Bardock. He has the power where you can discard a card from your hand to do different things. Each of his levels do kind of different stuff like that. And she makes it so you don't have to discard those cards. And then lastly, Raditz in Bad Company is a one of those kind of random levels that we talked about at the very beginning of the video that was released to sort of amplify the stack. Obviously, Raditz 1 through 3 and 4 from Saiyan Saga, as well as 4 from Frieza Saga, are all not great because they're just from a really long time ago. This card is introduced to kind of give you a fresh face to a Raditz stack. He uses cards that can search for drills. They can now search for non-combats as well, specifically styled non-combats. And then your styled non-combats that you play gain resist, so you can really build kind of a unique package. One of the things that he works cool in is blue. He works nice with those blue. There's a blue non-combat that performs an energy attack and it's a physical. You can now play those, give them resist so they stick on the table a little bit longer. And then also your cards that prevent damage can also prevent damage from focus attacks, because as anyone who knows the rules well knows that cards that prevent can't prevent focused. So he is a nice little poster boy for this kind of Saiyan prevention archetype that we've created as well. So Saiyan World Game Saga is also quite a playable deck. Does some really cool stuff with a few of the cards introduced in the last couple of NZ sets. Definitely worth observing if that interests you at all. There are, of course, a lot more. We've looked at 20 cards or something. of 200. There are plenty more that if you were to go deep diving, you'd find and think were cool. But we really just wanted to cover the cards that were like, even if you've never played NZ before, had no intention of doing so, playing against it, here are the number of them that we like think you'll just probably see, or could at least probably see, things that we've seen put up numbers within the league, things that show up commonly or placing. And then these kind of cards are cards that highlight well what most of NZ does, where it's just sort of propping up an underplayed thing. Turles got a new ally who makes him super, super cool. Definitely worth considering if you're into Turles. If the cover photo of the Midwest Melee event is any indication, he's my favorite guy. So pretty excited that that card exists for me. There's a lot of things worth looking into. And if you've played the game a bunch or have any interest in just kind of spicing up what options are available to you, there's a lot of new tools available within the NC card pool.
Yeah, so that's sort of our primer for the Midwest Melee. We really just wanted to make sure people who weren't familiar with NZ weren't intimidated by it, and then even just in general, people who hadn't played in a long time were up to speed with things. As the slide says, it's mostly going to be a fun tournament. We're trying to celebrate this 20-plus-year-old card game that we all love, and a lot of the people on our community have been playing for a while, but it'll be nice to sort of meet everyone in person and maybe see some new faces there. It's a tournament, but it's also, like I said, a celebration of the game, the community as well. And it's also a celebration of sort of the league that we've built up in the community. And we really want to expand how many people are interested in the game. If you have any questions, I would definitely encourage you to look in the description for all the links, especially the Z League Discord link. It'll have information on the event, as well as just if you need help building a deck, if you need help getting proxies, if you have any rules questions, if you have any questions about stuff in the CRD, any of those types of things, if you need help with logistics for getting to the event or anything like that, that Discord's a great place to be. Also, even if maybe you can't make it to Midwest Melee, but you do have interest in getting into playing the Score Z, we have, like I said, we have a webcam league that we play, and we play with all these NZ cards on webcam. And if you can't make it to Midwest Melee, maybe this video will inspire you to play some of our either tournaments or even just play pickup games on our server on our Discord. So definitely check the link in the video description. I think that was it from my end. Was there anything else you needed to talk about, Derek?
That's it. The league is is constantly growing. We've got like pushing 300 members in the Discord actively. There are like 20 of us who play like really regularly. Events always fire at 16, 20 people, and if we can kind of expand that further, that's great. If not, it's just going to be nice to see everyone, whether you're great, new, never played, rusty, whatever. All are welcome, all are encouraged to participate. It's just a celebration of the game, the work the league has put into keeping it alive, and just how much we love the Score DBZ CCG.
All right, I think that's it. If you nothing else, I think that's all for me as well. And
All right. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope to see you at the event. We're just over a month away. At the time of uploading, we're probably like literally a month away. So coming right up. See you soon.